Grief has a sound. It is the hush that follows a shovel of wet earth, the way umbrellas whisper when a rainstorm turns a cemetery into glass. The morning we buried my husband Gordon at Memorial Oak, the organ throbbed somewhere distant and the lilies smelled like cold metal. I told myself the worst was already done. Then I watched my daughter-in-law's eyes move over the mourners like she was sorting inventory, and I understood the funeral was only the opening move of a longer game. I did not tremble. I tucked my shawl tighter and promised Gordon I would be fine. On the drive back to River Oaks, the back seat felt larger than a room because the spot beside me was empty. Sable drove with red lacquered nails tapping the wheel, checking the mirror without an ounce of softness. My son Nathan sat rigid beside her, the kind man who hates conflict more than he loves peace. When we turned into the oak-lined driveway, rain still needled the streetlights. 3 of my leather suitcases stood in the open like forgotten pets. Sable did not bother with theatrics. She opened the garage and gestured inside. "You can stay here. The room next to the dogs is still empty." Her heels clicked away before the words finished echoing. Nathan did not look up from his phone. I carried the bags into the damp little room and sat on a sagging cot beneath a window the size of a shoebox. My hands shook only once. Then the quiet settled, heavy and useful. Gordon used to say that the right silence is a weapon. He had arranged our life with the same calm that kept him steady through market storms. Before his last hospital stay, he moved every account, every bond, every deed into my name. The Highland Park property, the Azure Cove Villa in Cancun, the portfolio of energy stocks and government bonds, $19 million written in the discreet ink of preparation. He left me a note. Make sure Cass never has to ask permission to live in her own home. I kept the letters and the keys in a place only I knew. In the garage that first night, with the air smelling of oil and rust, I repeated his words until my breath evened out. At 6 a.m., the house above me woke like a machine. Coffee hissed. Water ran. Sable's heels measured out orders. Eggs Benedict for Nathan, pancakes for the kids, salad for me. She underlined the word me on the note taped to the fridge as if it were a border. Nathan kissed my cheek like an obligation and said not to take things personally. Ava and Liam hovered in the doorway with eyes that had learned to watch for weather. I fed the dogs and taught the children to slip warm cookies into their pockets with a wink that meant kindness still lives in this house. By noon, the magnolia tree out back shook rain from its leaves the way grief shakes itself clear of a heart. I sat beneath it and wrote the first line in a small leather notebook Gordon had given me for our 40th anniversary. Day 1. They think I have no worth. I will not correct them. The second morning at 6:10 a.m., I heard Sable on the phone murmuring about a nursing home in Dallas, cheaper than keeping her here. The word slid under the door like cold water. I did not argue. I ironed her dresses and returned her heels spotless and noted the names on a credit card bill left open on the vanity. Spa Serenity, Yoga Retreat, a boutique in Aspen with prices that sound like dares. I did not touch her papers. I learned her hours instead. At 5:47 p.m., she laughed into a call about a partner in a Dallas project. At 7:35 p.m., she locked the master bedroom door. I kept times and details because patterns tell the truth people refuse to say. On the 7th day, I went upstairs after midnight, slipped into Gordon's study, and used his old desktop to review the joint account Nathan and Sable shared. I am not a genius with computers, but marriage teaches you passwords the way storms teach you where the roof leaks. Transfers regular as tides bled out to a company called Serene Holdings. A P.O. box. No office. No face. I closed the drawer and returned to the garage, the thin blanket stinging my skin like a dare. Day 7. Money is leaving through a hollow door. Say nothing to Nathan. The right silence sharpens vision. By 8:40 a.m. the next morning, Sable's car had rolled away, and Nathan had disappeared into the habit of work. I dialed a number I had not called in months. Morton and Associates, Caleb speaking. The calm in his voice dropped something heavy from my lungs. I told him I would be there by 10 a.m. I wore a cream dress and tied my hair back, and when I reached the red brick building in Midtown, I walked into the conference room like someone who had remembered her real name. Caleb slid a blue folder toward me, labeled Assets and Trust of Gordon Reed. He spoke without drama. The trust in Mexico that secures the villa, the Texas properties, the stocks and the bonds. Everything in my name alone. He placed Gordon's handwritten note on top. Make sure Cass never has to depend on anyone. Never. Grief rose like a tide and then retreated, leaving a clean shoreline in its wake. Caleb advised patience. Tell no one. Keep your routine. When the time is right, we will formalize everything. I left with copies in a secure envelope and a steadiness I had not carried since the first hospital wristband. On the way home, I bought a cappuccino because Gordon always insisted I drink one on Sundays, the day when life should taste like foam and warmth. I created a private email with a night-long password and sent encrypted backups to a cloud that wears no name. By 3 p.m., I was back in the kitchen. Sable stood near the window, sunlight turning her perfume into a fog. She told an unseen voice that she could move funds by the weekend. She hung up and asked me for tea as if we were friends. I stirred honey into the cup and thought of waves meeting stubborn rocks. Some things erode only when pressed again and again. I returned to the garage and opened the leather notebook. Between my palm and the paper lay a line I had waited all my life to write. Begin. I will not win with noise. I will win with light. Then I tucked Gordon's key into my pocket, set 2 alarms for 5:30 a.m. and 10 p.m., and slept for the first time without dreams. The game had started, and for once, I already understood the rules. By 9:50 a.m. the next morning, Sable clicked through the kitchen in leggings and full television-ready makeup, the perfume so strong it made the coffee smell retreat. She told Nathan she had yoga downtown, kissed the air near his cheek, and swept out with a white leather bag that no one carries to a class. I rinsed the mugs and looked at the clock. By 9:52 a.m., the garage door had closed. I took Gordon's spare phone from my purse, called a cab, and asked the driver to follow a pearl-white BMW that had just turned east. He looked at me in the mirror, with the tired wisdom of people who live by the hour. People only follow the truth they already feel, he said. I nodded and clasped my shawl. The truth had a dress code today, and it was silk. The BMW slid beneath the awning of the Argonaut Hotel at 10:30 a.m. Air conditioning spilled from the revolving doors, along with the smell of orchids and wax. I waited by a planter, sunglasses hiding a face that had learned to hold still. In under 5 minutes, Sable stepped inside. Now, in beige heels and a fitted aqua dress, she moved like a woman who expected yes. At 10:42 a.m., she sat across from a tall man with slicked-back hair in the corner near the bar. I knew his name from a broker profile I had searched in the long quiet of midnight. Derek Cole. Their hands touched and an envelope thick as a paperback slid across the table. I rested the phone on my palm and pressed my thumb to begin recording. They did not look up. People rarely do when they think the room belongs to them. By 11:05 a.m., I had what I needed. Sable rose with a small private smile. Derek kissed her wrist, and they parted like people who believed paper could do more than vows. In the cab, I watched the video twice, then saved it to a private cloud and to an encrypted drive named Lotus, because that was what Gordon called me in his letters. A flower that rises clean from mud. By noon, I was home with a bag of groceries and a face that looked ordinary. When Sable breezed in at 5:40 p.m., hair in a high knot and towel around her neck, she announced to the room that yoga had been packed and that she felt lighter. I poured her an herbal tea and said gently that with perfume that strong, she truly did need a detox. For the first time that week, a hairline crack appeared in her smile. That night at 11:10 p.m., the house fell into the kind of hush that invites careful steps. A faint glow leaked from the living room. Sable had left her laptop open, the screen half bright, as if it was also nervous. I waited 10 minutes for the floors to settle, then crossed the room and sat down. No password. The inbox had a subject line that caught breath more surely than a shout. Divorce paperwork nearly finished. Waiting on the estate confirmation. The sender was an attorney named David Carrera who wrote about shell companies and moving assets and the need to keep the mother-in-law from interfering. My anger did not rise. Clarity did. I photographed each page in sequence and copied the mail folder to a small black USB Gordon used for contracts. The progress bar moved like a second hand in a quiet church. When it finished, I cleared the recent files, closed the lid, and returned to the garage with a steady heartbeat and cold skin. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I had printed the emails and tucked them with the hotel video inside a sealed envelope in Gordon's desk. At 6:15 a.m., Nathan's footsteps paused outside the study door, as if memory had reached through and taken his sleeve. He opened the office for the first time since the funeral. Light slid across the oak like a blessing. He stood with a stack of yellowed papers in hand and turned slowly. The boy he had been, flickering through the man he was. "Mom," he said, his voice not much above a breath. "This house is yours." He had found the original will Gordon had kept in an inner drawer that slid beneath the visible one. Sable appeared in the doorway at 6:20 a.m., mascara perfect, jaw rigid. "What is that?" she asked, stepping forward and snatching the papers. Her eyes moved across the lines, then she threw back a laugh that was part disbelief and part alarm. "You hid this?" she said. "You pretended to be poor to control us." I placed the sealed envelope on the desk and lifted the flap. I did not raise my voice. Perhaps it is better if we look at the whole truth together. Nathan's face emptied of color as he studied each photo from the Argonaut and every line of the attorney's emails. By 6:40 a.m., he had reached the sentence about estate confirmation and guardianship tactics, and he sank into a chair as if the wood had become ocean. Sable tried a new tone that slid between outrage and pity. "You followed me," she said. "You stalked me. To ruin my marriage." I shook my head. "I went to your yoga class. That is where the envelope found you." The clock ticked. Outside, the Magnolia moved in the wind that had finally arrived. At 6:50 a.m., Nathan set the papers down and looked at me with eyes I recognized from his first day of school. He did not have words. The next ones belonged to Sable, and they were a last attempt to rewrite a page that had already been printed. "You will not win this," she said, voice low. "I know people who can have you declared incompetent. You will lose the house and the accounts and the villa." I lifted Gordon's small brass key and placed it beside the will. "Inside the safe are copies," I said. "Outside this room are backups you cannot touch. If you force my hand, everything goes to my attorney before noon." At 7 a.m., the coffee machine hissed to life in the kitchen, and the children's door creaked. The house held its breath. Nathan stood, straightened his tie with hands that shook, and said in a voice I had not heard since he was a teenager who found his spine, "Enough." The day of confrontation had arrived, with morning light instead of thunder. The truth was on the table, and there was no version of it that could be made small. At 7:05 a.m. that same morning, Nathan's voice rose for the first time in years.
"Sable, come down here."
It was not anger. It was something heavier, a man realizing too late that silence had made him complicit. She appeared at the top of the stairs in a red silk robe, eyes blazing, and descended like a queen refusing exile. "What are you shouting about?" she demanded. Nathan's hands trembled but didn't fall.
"Pack your things," he said. "You're leaving this house."
For a moment the air turned solid, then came her brittle laugh. "You can't throw me out. Everything here is mine. I made this house livable. Without me, you'd be nothing but your mother's shadow." I stood at the edge of the room, calm as still water. "Sable," I said quietly. "Enough." She turned on me, spitting venom. "You again? You forged those papers. You twisted Nathan against me. You think anyone will believe a bitter old woman?" I didn't answer. I just picked up my phone and pressed one button. "Caleb," I said when he answered, "change the locks and file the asset protection order today." Sable's expression faltered. Nathan turned toward her, his face pale but resolute. "I already read everything," he said softly. "The emails, the videos, the divorce plans. You weren't protecting us, Sable. You were selling us." She froze, then screamed, "You'll regret this!" Her voice cracked under the weight of its own fury.
"You'll both regret this!"
The children had come to the stairs, Ava clutching her brother's hand. I gave them a small, gentle nod. "Go upstairs, loves," I said. "It's just grown-ups being loud." They obeyed, though Ava's wide eyes lingered on her mother. When the front door finally slammed and the white BMW pulled out of the drive, the whole house sighed. Not peace yet, just silence, too tired to fight. Nathan sank onto the sofa, elbows on his knees. "Mom," he whispered, voice breaking. "I don't even know who I am anymore." I laid a hand on his shoulder. "You're a man learning to stand." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I went to fetch Gordon's old wool blanket, the blue one from our fishing trips, and draped it over his shoulders. "Your father used to say the strongest man isn't the one who never falls," I told him. "It's the one who stands back up, no matter how late." That night, after Nathan had gone to bed, I walked through the upstairs hall and opened the door to the master bedroom for the first time in months. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, the way it used to when Gordon read by the window. Everything was exactly where we had left it. The armchair, the wedding photo, the silk curtains trembling in the soft wind. I stood by the window and whispered, "I did it, Gordon. I kept my promise." The moonlight spilled over the magnolia outside, its branches glinting like silver veins. For the first time in a long while, I lay down in my own bed and slept without fear. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sable standing on the porch with Derek Cole beside her, his gray suit gleaming, his smirk even more so. "We're here to talk," she said stiffly. I stepped aside. "Then talk." They sat on the sofa, both careful not to sink too deeply, as if pride required posture. Derek opened his briefcase and laid out an envelope. "Mrs. Reed," he said smoothly, "we're offering a settlement. $3 million. Nothing unreasonable. Think of it as support for the children." I smiled without warmth. "Support for your debts, you mean?" He blinked, composure slipping. I walked to the cabinet, opened the top drawer, and returned with the black folder. "Cole Derek, personal debt record," I read aloud. His face lost color. "You owe $200,000 to a Dallas casino, and you forged a partner's signature in Austin." I have every document, every slip. Sable turned on him in disbelief. "Derek, is that true?" He stammered, unable to meet her eyes. I turned my gaze on her. "And as for you, Sable, one more step in this house and I send your hotel video to the court. You'll lose custody before your lawyer finishes his coffee." For a long moment, no one breathed. Then Derek rose, voice hoarse. "Come on," he muttered. "We're leaving." Sable stood too, trembling, eyes glossy. "You're cruel," she whispered. I just wanted to take care of my kids. I shook my head. No, you wanted to own everything and call it love, but love doesn't humiliate, it builds. Her tears came then, not remorse, just exhaustion. They walked out into the noon light and didn't look back. When the door closed, the echo felt like the end of a long storm. I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the porch. The air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of magnolia and the distant laughter of children. The sunlight lay gentle across the lawn. I thought of Gordon's old saying, "When truth returns to its rightful place, peace follows." It was true. For the first time in years, peace finally had an address. And it was mine. 3 days later, Caleb called. His voice was calm, steady as a clock. "Cassandra, everything's finalized." The court approved the protective order. Neither Sable nor Derek Cole can come near you or your family for 2 years. If they do, the police will handle it. I exhaled slowly, watching sunlight move across the floorboards. The house had begun to sound different, lighter somehow. "Thank you, Caleb," I said. "I think Gordon can finally rest." He chuckled softly. "And you can finally live." When Nathan returned from filing his divorce papers, he sat at the dining table, hands clasped, eyes red but clearer than I'd ever seen. "It's over, Mom," he said quietly. "The lawyer said everything's airtight." I turned in the photos, the emails, everything. I poured him coffee the way I used to when he was a teenager who thought the world was too heavy. "Good," I said. "Now start again." That's the only revenge worth having. Peace. The Houston Chronicle ran the story a week later. Broker Derek Cole investigated for fraud and extortion. The article was long and precise, complete with a photo of him leaving court in handcuffs. Beneath it, a smaller line. Source claims key evidence provided by the widow of the late businessman Gordon Reed. I folded the paper and set it aside. I wasn't proud, only relieved. Justice doesn't need applause, it only needs daylight. In the days that followed, the house returned to its rhythm. Morning smelled of coffee again, of pancakes and sunlight. Ava and Liam came down the stairs without fear, asking if they could play in a magnolia garden. Nathan started therapy, learning how to speak again, really speak. One night he knocked on my door. "Mom," he said softly. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled. Forgiving isn't the same as forgetting, Nathan. It's just the decision to stop letting pain steer your life. He nodded and hugged me, the kind of embrace that feels like both apology and promise. Caleb and I later met to finalize something Gordon would have approved of, a scholarship fund under the Reed Foundation. It would support Ava, Liam, and other children whose lives needed second chances. When I signed the papers with Gordon's old fountain pen, the ink spread across the page like sunlight finding a window. Caleb said, "He'd be proud, Cassandra." I smiled. He always wanted our money to build things, not bury them. Weeks passed, quiet and kind. The garage that once felt like exile stayed empty by choice. I hired Estelle, a kind Dominican woman, to help around the house. When she asked, "Should I clean the downstairs room too?" I said, "No, leave it as it is." She didn't ask why. That room, with its rust stains and low ceiling, remained as a reminder of who I had been and how far I had climbed. Every morning, the magnolia tree bloomed brighter. Sometimes I'd sit beneath it, notebook in hand, writing lines about endurance and kindness. Ava often joined me, her sketchbook open on her knees. One afternoon, she looked up and asked, "Grandma, why don't you hate Mom?" I closed my notebook and smiled gently, because hate is heavy, sweetheart, and I've carried enough. She tilted her head. "But you remember, right?" "Always," I said. "Remembering isn't the same as hating. It's how we stay wise." That evening, I sat in Gordon's study, the sunset painting the walls in amber light. His letter still lay in the drawer, the one that said, "Don't fight from anger, Cass. Wait until you're clear. Then you'll win." I whispered, "I waited, Gordon, and now I understand." Outside, the magnolia petals fell one by one, quiet as blessings. 3 months later, I packed a single suitcase. The house was in order, the lock secure, the laughter of my grandchildren echoing down the hallways like music. When I told Nathan, "I'm going to Cancun for a while," he didn't try to stop me. He just hugged me and said, "Go, Mom. You deserve to rest." I smiled. "It's not rest, Nathan. It's return." The flight took 3 hours, but the moment the ocean appeared below, blue and endless, I felt as if time had folded, carrying me back to the day Gordon first showed me the Azure Cove villa on a postcard and said, "One day we'll grow old there." The villa stood white and graceful among the palms, the red tiles shining against the sea. When I opened the door, the smell of salt and cedar wrapped around me like an embrace. Every piece of furniture was as Gordon had left it. The oak rocking chair, the painting of the bay, the photo of us laughing in sunlight. I threw open the windows and let the breeze rush in. "I'm home, love," I whispered. Outside, the waves rolled steady, their rhythm softer than sorrow and stronger than time. The days found their own peace. Mornings began with tea on the porch, watching sunlight climb the water. At noon, I volunteered at the local hospital, helping tourists and elderly travelers who spoke little Spanish. The nurses started calling me Senora Reed, the calm one who made everyone smile. "You bring peace," one of them said. "Maybe," I replied, "because I finally found it." Lucia and Matteo, the couple who looked after the villa, treated it like a living soul. Lucia said one afternoon, "This house waited for you, Signora." "It feels alive again," I smiled. "Maybe it waited for both of us." Evenings were my favorite: grilled fish, red wine, and the sound of waves against the shore. Some nights I'd sit alone under the open sky, the moonlight stretching silver across the sea, and feel Gordon's presence in the wind. I'd whisper, "I kept what mattered: my dignity, our name, and the peace you wanted me to find." Every Sunday, Nathan called on video. Ava and Liam squeezed into the frame, their laughter spilling through the screen. "Grandma, look!" "We planted tomatoes. They're almost as tall as me." I laughed until tears blurred the ocean behind them. Nathan said softly, "You look happy, Mom." "Maybe for the first time," I answered. "Happiness isn't something people give you. It's what's left when you stop being afraid." One evening, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. "Cassandra, I'm sorry for everything." It was from Sable. I stared at it for a long time before pressing delete. Not out of bitterness, but because forgiveness doesn't always need an audience. Some apologies arrive too late to change anything, and that's all right. They still count as lessons. As the weeks passed, I began writing again, letters I'd never send. Journal pages filled with gratitude instead of anger. In the last entry I wrote, "Some battles are fought in silence, but the quiet ones often end with the deepest peace." I looked out at the sea and thought about everything I had lost and everything I had rebuilt. The woman who once slept beside a box of dog food in her own house was gone. In her place stood someone freer, still tender, but no longer breakable. That night, I left the balcony doors open. The ocean breeze brushed my face, and the waves whispered against the shore like a lullaby. I closed my eyes, hearing Gordon's voice in the rhythm of the tide. "You did it, Cass. You came back to yourself." I smiled. "Yes, love, I did." If this story has touched you, take a moment to breathe, to remember your own strength. Share it with someone who's still finding their way back to peace. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what does dignity mean to you after the storm?